all microphones muted. We request that you keep your microphones muted for the program. Cameras have also been turned off. Our speaker tonight will be introduced by Charlene Dunn, the Patient Outreach Coordinator for the LAM Foundation. Char leads our education programs through the LAMposium in Your Living Room series, coordinates our Circle of Hope transplant support program, and supports the LAM Liaison Patient and Family Network. As a LAM patient and a transplant recipient, Char conveys a calming spirit of compassion and understanding that puts patients, family, and family members at ease. Please welcome Charlene Dunn.
Thank you, Sue. When I was asked to introduce Dr. McCormack this evening, I had to pause and take a step back. Where do I begin? Well, I could begin with his connection to our LAM community. Dr. McCormack is the scientific director of the LAM Foundation and has served in this volunteer role since the inception of the foundation in 1995. I could also begin by sharing with you just a few of the accomplishments Dr. McCormack has achieved during his tenure as scientific director. For example, we now have an FDA-approved treatment for LAM. We also have a biomarker that has spared many of our patients the need for biopsy. And we have a LAM and rare lung disease network that has expanded to include more than 60 clinics worldwide. When thinking about this introduction, the bigger challenge for me was, how do I find the words to introduce someone who has so significantly impacted my own life? In many regards, someone who saved my life, someone who corrected the course of my medical care at a most critical time, someone who walked me through my fears and whose knowledge and compassion are simply off the chart, someone who for the past 25 years, a quarter century, has not only dedicated himself to finding a cure for a rare lung disease, but has also committed himself to improving the quality of care and the quality of life for every LAM patient who has reached out to him. And at this point in his career, that is a heck of a lot of women. Well, it was clear to me that I couldn't write this introduction by myself. You see, I believe that many of my LAM sisters could write this introduction, each with her own story, and each equally filled with passion and gratitude. So I asked around a bit, and here's what a few others had to say about our beloved scientific director, Dr. Frank McCormack. Quoting a patient from the West Coast, "From the beginning, Frank McCormack has clearly invested his heart and soul along with his clinical expertise. He cares about each of us as a person. I've had some unusual challenges through the years, yet he's been there for me, even at 3 a.m. And when I tearfully expressed my gratitude for his support, he looked me in the eye and said, 'I won't give up if you don't give up.' That's just who he is." And from someone in the Midwest who knows him very well, "When I think about Frank, I think about his longevity. You can't do it, not for 25 years, unless you're in it to win it." And finally, from a patient on the East Coast, "What stands out for me as a patient and as an emeritus board member is how, over the years, Dr. McCormack has approached every decision with the question, what is best for the patients? What is best for the patients? How lucky are we that this man has had our backs for the past 25 years? It is my sincere honor to introduce our scientific director, Dr. Frank McCormack." Frank? And you're good to go, Frank.
I'm close. That was an absolutely lovely introduction, Charlene. Thank you so much. I sincerely appreciate the opportunity to speak about the LAM Foundation on this auspicious occasion of the 25th anniversary celebration. I'm delighted to have so many people join. So what I've learned from 20 years of giving after dinner scientific talks is that people would generally rather talk to each other than listen to someone from the podium or worse from a computer. And attention spans never extend beyond dessert. And I think from that perspective, we may be in good shape on the West Coast on this call, but maybe not on the East Coast. And it's usually a bad idea to show slides of cellular signaling pathways, the Krebs cycle, or really any cycle. So tonight, I'm going to focus more on reflection than science. And my LAM memories are filled with my own biases and distortions. And you're all muted, so you'll just have to deal with that. It's disorienting to have no audience response. I can't hear you laughing at my lame jokes or not laughing at them. I can't hear you groan, so I'm probably going to show you the Krebs cycle anyway. I'll be speaking in part, like Charlene did, through the testimonial of others, and I will try to keep this short since it's Friday evening. So this is a familiar slide to many. This is a map of progress in LAM over the first 15 years. And I want to spend just a minute taking a look at this, starting at the top left, when the first case of LAM was described in a patient with tuberous sclerosis in 1918, the first sporadic LAM patient described in 1937, and then virtually nothing but descriptive papers until 1993, when the first tuberous sclerosis gene was discovered by a consortium of people led by many of the scientists that I'm going to talk about tonight. The LAM Foundation was founded in 1995, and two years later, the second tuberous sclerosis gene, which was tuberous sclerosis gene 1, was discovered. And not very shortly thereafter, Teresa Smolaric and Elizabeth Henske reported that the form of LAM we called sporadic LAM, that no one had realized was associated with tuberous sclerosis, indeed was associated with mutations in tuberous sclerosis genes. And this discovery happened because Sue Burns had collected a dozen blocks of LAM tissues from around the country from LAM patients she'd identified. And we had brought them to Teresa at first, and Teresa and Anil Menon were both interested in genes that were associated with leiomyomas or uterine fibroids. And Teresa was looking to see if the mutations in those tissues were fibroid mutations, in essence. She didn't at first think that the tuberous sclerosis genes were all that important, but about that time, I contacted Lisa Henske, and she said that she routinely tested for these kinds of mutations in tissues, and she'd be happy to take a look. And so both Lisa and Teresa were looking for these mutations at the same time, and indeed they found them, or at least the footprint of these mutations at about the same time. And this was the first real breakthrough in LAM, I think, was the discovery that this non-inherited form of LAM, sporadic LAM, was due to mutations in tuberous sclerosis genes. After that, just serendipitously, it was discovered that these genes control the size of fly eyes, and that led to discoveries that they also control cell growth and proliferation. Dr. Henske, about a year later, identified the exact mutations that were occurring in tissues in the kidney and the lung of these patients, and indeed they were tuberous sclerosis mutations, and in a big surprise, the same mutations were present in the kidney tissue and the lung tissue from a single patient, suggesting that the same source of cells is populating both organs. And that led to a theory that LAM was metastatic, and later Lisa demonstrated that indeed LAM cells move from somewhere in the body to the lung using transplanted lung tissue as her substrate. So these mutations followed in very rapid succession after the tuberous sclerosis genes were discovered, but it wasn't really absolutely clear that they related to LAM until Vera Kremskaya in 2002 demonstrated that the lung in patients with LAM exhibited the signature of an activated mTOR pathway that's controlled by these tuberous sclerosis genes. So she set the stage for trials by demonstrating that indeed in LAM lung tissue, these tuberous sclerosis mutations were present, which were identified by Lisa Henske and Teresa Smolarek, and in fact, were also driving this inappropriate cellular pathway. Raymond Young demonstrated in animal models that rapamycin shrunk tumors that were populated with these cells containing tuberous sclerosis mutations. And there was a trial conducted in Cincinnati by Lisa Young, myself, David Franz, and John Bissler that demonstrated that a drug that targets the mTOR pathway, sirolimus, shrunk these kidney tumors in a dramatic way. Within 6 months, reduced their size by half. And in an even bigger surprise, that the lung function in the patients who happened to have LAM in this trial improved rather dramatically. And that set the stage for this, this larger trial, the MILES trial, which I'll talk a little bit more about in a moment. And that trial began enrollment at the end of 2006. So this was generally the course of things over the first 10 or so years of the foundation. This is a quote from Lisa Henske. She says, "It's only because of the LAM Foundation that I became involved in LAM research. I'll never forget my first LAM Foundation meeting held in Cincinnati Community Center conference room with about 5 physicians and a small group of women with LAM. At that time, almost nothing was known about the cause of LAM, and there was no treatment. The chance for my career to make a difference in the lives of women with LAM means everything to me. I'm so grateful to the LAM Foundation for bringing us together and catalyzing so much research progress." And really, a major source of the progress in LAM has been this annual meeting that we have together, in which roughly 120 to 150 patients and an equal number of scientists and clinicians get together to talk about LAM progress, to update patients, and to develop collaborations that lead to further progress. These meetings were inspired really by a tuberous sclerosis meeting that Lisa Henske had attended, and we adopted the strategy of mixing patients and physicians and scientists all together in this incredibly synergistic way that's become really the hallmark of these LAM meetings over years, and it's led to a tremendous amount of progress. Mike Borcher said about this meeting that he's always taken pride in his work, but it was always internalized. I would never really talk to my friends and family about what I did all of these years. Mike is a scientist that works at the University of Cincinnati. That changed for me when I attended the first LAMposium 5 years ago. I had never directly interacted with the patients who suffered from the diseases I was studying. It was difficult and emotional for me. Today, every one of my friends and family know that I work on LAM. They know what LAM is. They know what I try to do to help, and they know about the incredible LAM patients. So if I were to summarize the progress in the first 15 years, we had this organized, motivated patient community, this committed community of clinical investigators and scientists, a tremendous partnership with the Tuberous Sclerosis Alliance and the NIH, and with international LAM communities. And we've begun to gain an understanding of the molecular basis of LAM. A few favorite memories from this time. I remember Sue Burns being reluctant to spend money to upgrade her typewriter to a computer in 1996. She was typing on a 1950s version typewriter for the first year or two of the foundation. I remember a story of her racing to the post office in her pajamas and in a crazed drive to ship an overdue R13 LAMposium meeting grant to the NIH. I remember Fran, a poor Fran, working endlessly and selflessly devoted to this cause, running errands for the foundation night and day. I remember thinking about ways to move LAM forward in every idle moment, in church, in the car, in the shower, everywhere. It's such a privilege to have this momentum and to be able to ruminate about what sort of progress we could make with each endeavor. So we would think about how we could get scientists together, what scientists we needed in the group to advance the cause, what kind of meetings we could have that would be more effective. And then as Charlene was talking about in the beginning, about lives saved by the LAM Foundation, what she left out of her description of my role in her medical care was that really the person who talked her into going forward with a lung transplant was another LAM patient who had experienced a lung transplant and who convinced Charlene that it was worth fighting for. And I think that's just one of thousands of examples of how the LAM Foundation has connected people in a way that saves lives. And some of the secret weapons of this disease that don't get talked about very much are that there's an injustice to it. It looks just like emphysema, but there's no self-inflicted element. I know Bev Jackson has a backpack that says, "I've never smoked," on this backpack that carries her oxygen, because she wants people to know that she did not have anything to do with the lung disease that she developed. This disease catches people off guard, everyone, if the family, the physician, the patient, and it surprises and it shocks and it stuns. So there's a desire from the beginning that something has to be done about this. And our demographic, it affects our mothers, our sisters, our daughters in the prime of their lives. Their families and careers are at full tilt, and it moves slowly, so it provides time for all to engage. Often there are 3 and sometimes even 4 generations involved in the fight. And this collective inspiration to get patients and scientists together has been one of our secret weapons from the beginning. And that this molecular pathway in LAM is central to biology and life has been a saving grace, because the world's best scientists study it. The scientists who study this pathway win Nobel Prizes and Lasker Prizes because it is so key to cell biology and molecular biology. And it's an incredible stroke of luck that LAM enjoys the same attention, this very rare disease, because the pathway that's involved is really a fundamental biological pathway. So over this should say years 15 to 25, our understanding of the molecular basis of LAM continues to grow. And we've developed this network of expert centers for clinical care and for research. We have a registry and a tissue bank and a data center. We have an effective suppressive therapy, a useful diagnostic, predictive, and prognostic biomarker, a window into the natural history of LAM through lots of efforts at the NIH, and a clue now to the origin of LAM cells. This network, the LAM clinic network, began with domestic clinics around the United States, and it's grown now to include about an equal number of international clinics. And although they're quite virtual, these aren't clinics that we supply funding to outside of trials, but they're populated by physician scientists and clinicians who are passionate about patient care and about understanding the molecular basis of disease. And it's been very easy to engage patients or physicians and physician scientists in this network. We have quarterly conference calls that are run by the LAM clinic director, Nishant Gupta, where we share cases and an update on clinical and basic science. And because the physicians who populate these clinics are generally interested in rare diseases of all types, we've invited in other rare disease populations and rebranded the network as the Rare Lung Disease Network that studies a whole host of diseases that are associated with monogenic molecular defects, a single genetic defect in most cases. And these populations have grown and have become the substrate for trials. It's been an incredibly effective yet resource, it's an incredibly effective network that hasn't required a great deal of resources. We've developed very effective international partnerships through this clinic network and other efforts, especially with Japan and the United Kingdom. Simon Johnson in the United Kingdom, Yoshikazu Inoue and Ko Nakata, and Kuniaki Seiyama in Japan have all been valued colleagues and have major contributions to LAM. Other countries are emulating this LAM clinic network. There are now 5 LAM clinics in China that are following more than 2,000 patients. And they have annual LAMposiums that are modeled after the LAM Foundation. This young man in the bottom right is a physician in Guangzhou, China, who was visiting Cincinnati for the past year. And he tells me he's launching an 800-bed pulmonary-only hospital in Guangzhou with a strong focus on rare disease. He's part of the clinic network. The other clinic networks are shown here in the bottom left. And they examples of some of the participants in one of their recent LAMposiums is shown here in the top center. So this model is being emulated around the world and is going to lead to greater numbers of patients to study and contribute to progress. I wanted to talk just for a moment about the MILES trial and maybe some things that we haven't talked about before. This study was something that a lot of people thought should go forward, but no pharmaceutical company was stepping forward to conduct it. We decided that we would launch this trial in Cincinnati, despite the fact that many of us were rookies in clinical trials. We actually had some clinical or contract research organizations come through to interview for the position of helping us conduct this trial. And I had more than one of these organizations laugh when we described what we told them what we were going to do, conduct a trial, an investigator-initiated trial in 3 countries without enough money to finish it as we started. And they were not incorrect. This was a very naive idea. It was a massive undertaking. It was only possible because we could find the expertise to conduct this trial around the campus in Cincinnati and around the country. And because so many physician scientists stepped forward to help, despite the fact that the funding we could offer them was very, very low. So it became something that we decided we were going to try to accomplish despite the obstacles. We had a dozen meetings to design the trial. We had tremendous help from Eugene Sullivan, who had been at the FDA prior to participating in designing this trial. And it became a daily effort to conduct the trial and to troubleshoot with help from people around the country and Gene Sullivan and others. We launched the trial in 2006 or so. It took us 3 years to open all the sites. It took another 3.5 years to enroll all the patients. And it required us continually applying for funding, not just through sources in Cincinnati, but Greg Downey in Canada was applying, Ko Nakata and Yoshikazu Inoue in Japan were applying for funding. And over time, we were able to raise $8.5 million. I remember the day that we received the call about the results of the trial. It was December 1st, 2010. There were 2 or 3 of us sitting in a room hearing the data center telling us what the final outcome of the trial was. And the bottom line was that they said that the good news is that the trial was successful and positive, and the p-value was 0.0001 on the effect of sirolimus on lung function, which means that there's only a 1 in 10,000 chance that this positive effect of sirolimus on lung function could have happened due to chance. But they said the effect size was very small, and we asked them what was the effect size, and they said, well, there was only an 11 milliliter difference. And we hung up from that call, not fully understanding what they meant. But that evening, I was trying to sleep on this and wondered what they meant by an 11 milliliter difference. Was that in a year? Was that in a month? Well, it turned out when we called them back the next day, they said that 11 milliliter difference was per month, which is quite a large change in lung function for the patients. Decline in lung function for the patients who took the placebo versus the stabilization that patients enjoyed when they were on sirolimus. So that was not a small effect size. That was quite a positive result, and we were thrilled that we had the first effective treatment for LAM. After that, we asked Pfizer if they could help us change the label for sirolimus to reflect the fact that it's an effective treatment for LAM. And they replied, after some thought, that it just didn't make much sense. It was coming off patent. There didn't make a lot of sense for them to invest in the drug for such a rare disease. But I had heard at a tuberous sclerosis meeting about this avenue called a citizen's petition. And I talked to Gene Sullivan about how we might approach that. And he helped us contact the FDA and ask them about the potential to get this drug approved by compelling the company to change the label rather than have them decide to do that independently. And the company was quite open to that pathway. And in fact, the FDA told us that they really don't like that mechanism, but they'd seen the result of the trial and they thought it might be approvable through the usual route. We would need a complete study report, which we had not done during the course of the trial because we never intended to seek to change the label. So it took us over 2 years to complete this study report. And this was largely through efforts of Tammy Rhodes, who was a clinical trial and coordinator in Cincinnati, who spent her evenings and weekends preparing this document with me and with Pfizer and many others. And she devoted a good fraction of her team's effort to that as well, all without any compensation. And we were able to obtain FDA approval in 2015 through the efforts of many, many people. Lisa Young wrote this: "I've been reflecting on how meaningful the LAM Foundation has been to me. It's hard to believe that it's been 17 years since the meeting in Charleston where I presented pneumothorax data that I had assembled as a fellow. I'm so grateful for that introduction to LAM. I'll celebrate the 25th anniversary of the LAM Foundation, giving thanks for the path it has shown me, reinforcing my resolve for doing all I can do to support important things, and hoping that the world will have many more such success stories ahead." Now, I put Lisa's testimonial here because I wanted to remember to tell you that the MILES trial wasn't going so well in the last year. We hadn't been able to fully enroll the trial to a level where we thought we could prove effectiveness of the drug. And Lisa in the lab was working on developing a biomarker that could be used as a diagnostic eligibility criteria and clinical biomarker for LAM in VEGF-D. She published that work in 2010. We incorporated it as an eligibility criteria for the trial. It enables us to enroll another 14 patients, which ensured the success of the trial and brought the patient numbers to a level where we could actually answer the question. And she's made many other contributions to LAM, but I thought that one was very appropriate to note here. And it's been amazing to me how powerful FDA approval is. The Japanese contingent of the MILES trial asked us for the MILES data. Even before we had approached the FDA about FDA approval, they got their own PMDA approval, their equivalent of the FDA, in 2014 using MILES trial data. And after the US FDA approved sirolimus for LAM, 40 countries have followed, which has been absolutely amazing. Starting with Russia almost immediately and Korea. But the big change was with the European Union, which incorporates 27 countries. So now over 40 countries have approved this drug. And just recently we learned that Brazil has decided to provide sirolimus free to all LAM patients. And that is directly traceable to the efforts of Sue Sherman, who flew to Brazil to help them design an advocacy approach that included petitioning Pfizer to help with getting the drug for patients in that country. And that was a wonderful recent announcement that really buoyed us. The NHLBI Registry has defined the natural history of LAM, including survival and the rate of lung function decline. setting the stage for future trials in biomarker discovery. And the lion's share of the credit for this effort in the 1990s goes to Joel Moss and Angelo Taviera da Silva and their team at the NIH, who did almost all of the work for this study. They saw roughly 75 or 80% of the patients in this trial that enrolled 246 patients. Many of you contributed serum and lung function and imaging data in annual visits to this registry. Nishant Gupta, a few years ago, was able to link the data that you provided in the 90s to current CDC and UNOS databases. These are databases that describe survival and also transplant data to determine long-term outcomes in these patients. And this resource, with help from Simon Johnson in the UK, is going to allow us to develop personalized risk scores for LAM patients. What the study showed was that the average rate of decline in LAM is about 90 cc's per year, or 90 mils per year. That's about threefold higher than a completely healthy person. The transplant-free survival for LAM is greater than 20 years, which is something that had been suggested by retrospective studies and some questionnaire studies, but this was much better data to demonstrate that the survival of LAM, even before sirolimus, average median survival is greater than 20 years. And we're very hopeful that sirolimus is going to change this number for the better. This is from Amanda, Patricia, Mary, Pauline, and Joel at the NIH. Pauline, as you know, has been retired for a while, and I was really pleased to see that she had also weighed in on this statement. The LAM Foundation represents the essence of hope, creating a strong community of scientists, patients, and families to advance the understanding of the disease and support the well-being of patients. We learned from the LAM Foundation the importance one person can have in developing an agenda, and of the LAM patient community in moving this agenda forward. The LAM Foundation has been a consistent guiding presence for patients, families, and friends in support of its goal of finding a cure. Among other assets that have been that have accrued in the last 10 years, the LAM Guidelines were developed by a team of over 25 investigators, but much of the credit for closing on this very gigantic effort goes to Nishant Gupta, who helped us get over the goal line for both ATS Guidelines Part 1 and Part 2. And what they say basically is that sirolimus is an effective first-line treatment for LAM patients. We don't use hormonal therapy or doxycycline as a matter of course. VEGF-D is useful for diagnosis, and we shouldn't rely on the CT scan alone for the diagnosis of LAM. We can consider using transbronchial biopsy before surgical biopsy for LAM. That pleurodesis should be performed upon the first pneumothorax to avoid future events, and that prior pleurodesis is not a contraindication for transplant. So this has become a resource for physicians around the world. It gets a number of hits every day on the ATS website, and I think it's something that the LAM Foundation can be very proud of because it had a big part in organizing this group. We've also, through the LAM Foundation, Geraldine Finley, who's been with us since the beginning, now works for UpToDate, which is the primary resource for physicians looking for quick information about diseases in their offices. And with her help, Nishant and I have developed 3 LAM chapters that get an average of about 100 hits a day, or 36,000 or so hits per year. We've also updated the LAM Wikipedia page, which gets about 200 hits per day with very accurate information that can be easily accessed by the general public. And this is from Nishant. He said that my association with LAM and the LAM Foundation has given me a sense of purpose and a mission in life, and has inspired me to constantly strive to achieve something meaningful that touches the lives of our patients in a positive manner. The knowledge that there are LAM patients relying on us to advance the field is all the motivation I need to get up at ungodly hours of the morning and keep on pushing, even when it feels like I'm running on empty. Through this association, I've realized what being a physician means and learned the true meaning of gratitude. I can honestly say that I'm a better physician and a better human being because of LAM and the LAM Foundation. What is one of the most amazing things about this LAM Foundation effort over the last 25 years is its record of funding. These are the 150 or so projects that have been funded by the LAM Foundation since the first grant was awarded in 1996. Simon Johnson said, I started working on LAM about 25 years ago as a junior doctor, coincidentally around the time the LAM Foundation was established, and vividly remember the LAM Foundation call to Nottingham to say the pilot proposal on tuberin and LAM had been funded. I think that was one of the first LAM Foundation grants and a radical idea at the time. It's been a huge privilege to work with LAM Action, the LAM Foundation, and so many great colleagues and contribute in some way to how the outlook for women with LAM has changed over that time. LAMposium has been the highlight of my calendar since the first meeting in New York, talking research, meeting friends, doc talk, handing out the roses for the rose ceremony. I'm really looking forward to meeting everyone again next year. And the plan for the foundation funding has been the same from the beginning, to progress on this pathway from the first step, which was for Sue Burns to organize these patients, for us to engage and motivate science, to fund preliminary research that gets us to targets, which includes the gene, the protein, and the pathway, to educate our patient population about the importance of trials and engage the NIH for their help, define targets, do early studies in animals, followed by pilot trials, pivotal trials, and develop an effective therapy and FDA approval. All of the grants that we fund fall somewhere along this pathway. This is a geographic representation of where funding has gone. The total funding over this period of time is about $12.6 million. And you can see that there's a hotspot in Boston where Lisa and David Kwiatkowski and Brendan Manning and John Blennis are, and that we have awarded large amounts of funding to states across the Midwest, all the way to Texas and California. The number of grants by award time is shown here. And you can see that in any given year, we award somewhere between 2 and 10 grants. The larger grants are the blue and the green grants. And you can see that we've had a steady track record of funding through all of these years. The cumulative total in funding is now in excess of $12 million, which is phenomenal. This is on a background of about $25 million raised by the foundation overall. The $1 Million Bike Ride is an effort that was developed at the University of Pennsylvania that the LAM Foundation participates very avidly in, and has been a source of important funding for the last 5 years. LAM Foundation publications have grown every year, now totaling more than 100 publications per year. And our foundation represents hope for patients. It recruits new minds to LAM. It convinces federal funding agencies of grant worthiness for young people. When a young person applies for a LAM grant at the NIH, having achieved funding from other sources, such as the LAM Foundation, greatly enhances the credibility of their proposal. It launches careers. I think many of the young people that were listed on that slide of the 150 projects that we have funded will tell you that their LAM Foundation funding got their career off the ground. It facilitates promotions. I think Jane Yu, Vera Krimskaya would tell you that the LAM Foundation funding had very important role in their promotions. I think Vera was the first female PhD in the Department of Medicine at the University of Pennsylvania, which probably has a 250-year history, which is absolutely phenomenal. And we're proud to have been a small part of her career progress. It forms the basis for clinical trials. It certainly formed the foundation for the MILES trial. It produces clinically useful tools. I'm sorry, I forgot tools that we're able to use to diagnose and manage patients. And the LAM Foundation Funding advances the cellular and molecular understanding of LAM. It also recruits and retains people who become, where awardees become devoted LAM scientists and physicians who remain with us for long periods of time. All of these people listed have received LAM Foundation funding at some time, and all of them remain fully engaged to this day. And I can't help but think that LAM Foundation funding has been an important part of that, of the success with retaining their interest. They're phenomenal scientists. I want to give you just one example of one physician or one scientist who's near and dear to many of our hearts, Jane Yu. She trained with Lisa Henske at Fox Chase Cancer Center in Philadelphia. She was awarded a LAM Foundation postdoctoral fellowship when she was just getting started in Lisa's lab. She moved with Lisa to Harvard in 2008 and was able to ascend the ranks to become an independent investigator there. And the LAM Foundation funded her, her trainee with a postdoctoral fellowship for $150,000. From 2015 to the present, Jane has moved to the University of Cincinnati, is now a member of our pulmonary division. The LAM Foundation has funded her for approximately $300,000 with the grants that are named here, including an established investigator award. And what I can say about Jane is that the LAM Foundation had her at hello. She's been a fully engaged partner from the moment she attended her first LAMposium. The LAM Foundation has supported her career at every step, and she's now a respected independent investigator, being promoted to full professor, ready to devote her next 20 years to making LAM discoveries and training the next generation of LAM scientists. She works night and day on LAM. I don't know anyone who works harder than Jane Yu. And the total value of the NIH and DoD grants she now holds is $6 million. Now compare that to the $12 million LAM Foundation investment over 25 years. She now holds half that amount in awards she's won through her LAM expertise. And the LAM Foundation had a major role in getting her to this point. She is going to make us very proud, and she's going to help us make LAM discoveries for a long time to come. So here's some high-level results of LAM funding. I don't have time, and since it's after dinner, I don't want to show you a lot of detailed science, but I do want to provide just a high-level overview of what the results of some of the LAM funding we provided has been. And in addition to providing the basis for clinical trials and identifying new targets for LAM therapies, which is really our primary goal with LAM funding, we've discovered that LAM is the simplest, most decipherable cancer in all of creation. In the case of most cancer cells, there are dozens of DNA mistakes that enable them to disregard all the rules, grow beyond their boundaries, and destroy remote tissues. But LAM cells acquire some cancer capabilities with a single DNA mistake. And because it's so simple, the study of LAM provides insights into cancer's Achilles heel. And it's becoming interesting to people interested in cancers of all types. It's also providing, the study of LAM and tuberous sclerosis are also providing insights into basic cellular metabolism, including the Krebs cycle. And I'm sorry, I said I might not do this, but I'm showing you the Krebs cycle because it's amazing what we've had to go back and relearn about the Krebs cycle after we had stored our biochemistry textbooks from college for the last time, because it turns out that the LAM and tuberous sclerosis pathway interacts extensively with basic cellular metabolism. And the study of the LAM drug, sirolimus, is also shedding light on diabetes, obesity, and aging. There was a trial of whether LAM or sirolimus could extend the life of animals, in this case dogs. It's been shown to extend the life of mice. And there were trials for people who really like their dogs to see if they could extend the life of their animals beyond 5 years. A recent advance in LAM science that was directly enabled by LAM Foundation funding is this single cell analysis of LAM lung. In this set of experiments led by Minzi Guo, who's a postdoc in Yan Zhu's lab A group of us got together across the Cincinnati campus and extending on to Boston and Rochester, New York. We engaged a group of collaborators, obtained LAM lung through the help of the LAM Foundation, basically blew it up into separate cells. These were lungs obtained at transplant, and then asked each cell what their identity was through genetic methods. And what we discovered through that process is there was a group of cells that had no business being in the lung. There was a small LAM population of about 120 cells that expressed all of the markers we know to be expressed by LAM cells, and hundreds of markers we didn't know they were making. This discovery told us a lot about interactions that are going on between LAM cells and other cells in the lung. And when we asked the question of where these LAM cells might be coming from, Minzy blasted the genetic signature of these cells against organ systems throughout the body, and discovered that the closest match to the genetic signature of the LAM cells in the lung was the uterus, suggesting that perhaps the uterus is the source of the cells which populate the lung. Elizabeth Kopris, Cope as we call her, drove to a hysterectomy operation site in Indiana, and where Carol Weber, who's I think a big part of this celebration, was having an operation and had donated her tissues to LAM Research. When we brought the tissue back to Cincinnati and did the same single cell analysis, we found the same cells within the uterus of the LAM patient, Carol Weber. And Catherine Wickenheiser-Brokamp was able to go back to the uterus and identify the LAM cells using special stains, some of which are traditional LAM stains and some of which are brand new LAM stains identified through single cell analysis. Single cell analysis also identified proteins that are made by LAM cells that we suspected might be found in blood. And indeed, in some cases, we were able to identify biomarkers suggested by the single cell analysis in the bloodstream. And this is a tremendous resource to identify new biomarkers in the future that are going to help us manage LAM patients and make the diagnosis of LAM for some time to come. These studies are also being done by Lisa Henske and her group in Boston, and I expect great things from their analysis as well, probably to be published very soon. And this is a message from Yan Zhu, who said that her LAM journey has been short but very exciting. One thing I really learn and enjoy is the collaborative experience. LAM, like all complex diseases, cannot be conquered by one person or one team. The discovery is made possible through multidisciplinary collaboration, from the LAM Patient Society to the physicians and research teams. I've really enjoyed the sense of participating in this interdisciplinary collaboration. Everyone is so passionate and we all work toward the same goal. I feel very lucky to become a member of the big LAM family, and I'm looking forward to contributing more on the beautiful journey ahead. And I think you'd hear the same from her postdoc, Minzy Guo. So the LAM story is a triumph of patient advocacy and medical altruism. LAM science is among the fastest moving in medicine. The study of LAM is rewriting textbooks and shedding light on diabetes, cancer, and aging. LAM is mentoring other rare lung disease communities on paths to effective treatments. We have a deep understanding of the molecular basis of LAM. We have a therapy, a committed scientific and clinical community, and an effective clinic network. But we have more work to do because, as with all therapies, not all patients respond to sirolimus. And what LAM has is hard-won, precious, and delicate. It needs to be cultivated and nurtured and never taken for granted. What makes this community powerful is full immersion patient engagement. I put full stop there because that is exactly what's driven this field forward. I'm on a study section at the NIH that reviews grants from all kinds of lung diseases. We review about 100 grants every 3 months. And each time about 5% or more of the grants that we receive in a pool of thousands of lung diseases are LAM grants. And that's because physicians and scientists have access to resources, patient samples, participation in trials. You're what makes this research powerful, and progressive. So it's very important that this full patient engagement remain for the future. The LAM Foundation needs your help. We need you to be engaged. The LAM Foundation needs your expertise and your talents. And I'd invite you to call Sue and see how you can help. The future is bright because LAM has momentum. It attracts the interests of young scientists in pharma. And we've launched an endowed chair to ensure stable scientific leadership going forward. This has been done through the efforts of many at the LAM Foundation, Sue Sherman, Molly Long, through a generous donor to the University of Cincinnati. And I am very optimistic that this is going to provide a great deal of stability to the foundation for the future. So for myself, I'm grateful for the people I've met, the daily lessons I receive from patients in courage and resilience, the opportunity to talk about LAM all over the world, all I've learned about science and medicine from LAM, the privilege of reassuring patients every day in clinic, to have had such meaningful work for the 25 years that LAM has been part of my life, and to have had the support of my family through it all. Oops. This is my family and their significant others, my 5 children, my daughter-in-law, Monica, on the right, and my son-in-law, Mike, on the left. These are the newest additions to our family, our 4 grandchildren, who are the joys of our life. Thank you to all our colleagues and partners, LAM patients, the Tuberous Sclerosis Alliance, all of our colleagues at the NHLBI, the MILES, MILD, MIDAS, TRAIL, RESULT teams, LAM clinic directors, everyone at Pfizer who helped us with approval of the drug, Sue Sherman, Sue Burns, all my colleagues at the University of Cincinnati and Cincinnati Children's Hospital, for the funding we've had, for the partnerships with LAM foundations around the world. And to the LAM community, thank you for all of the LAM memories you provided for me. It's been one of the joys of my life to interact with this group of patients and physicians. And happy anniversary, the LAM Foundation.
Thank you, Dr. McCormack. I know we have, I don't know, Dr. McCormack, can you see the chat box? Had some great conversation going in there. Ladies, gentlemen, if you want to write a comment or ask a question, please feel free to use that chat box on the right-hand side. And while we let a few of those fire up, Dr. McCormack, I'll just remind everyone to please join us tomorrow evening for to kick off the 25th anniversary celebrations. We will have a pre-party. There we go, Power of Hope pre-party at 7 p.m. This is cocktail hour style. So please feel free to have a beverage on hand of your choice. Come with a toast that you might like to offer to anyone, any part of our LAM community. And we'll come spirited with your derby hat, if you had one, as we prepared for the gala in Cincinnati. And we'll kind of lift our hats off to the foundation and segue then over to the Breath of Hope 25th anniversary celebration, which you'll be able to log into from the GiveSmart page and see that live there. And actually, let me correct myself, no login necessary. Just go to the lam25.givesmart.com and you'll be able to view our live stream there. And just a brief reminder as well that the online silent auction is open until 3 p.m. Eastern time on Sunday. And again, Dr. McCormack, thank you very much. The messages are pouring in. I'm just going to take a minute to read a couple of them to you. And you comment if you would like. Dr. McCormack, thankful for the journey. This is from Leslie Corby. It began with a single step in 2008. For Leslie, so glad I can step it up to support LAM research. Hugs to all the LAM Foundation and the trial teams and our treasured LAM patients. We also have Dr. McCormack. Thank you for what you have been for all of us LAM patients. You are so appreciated. And there's a lot of that in there, and Frank will preserve that for you moving forward, so you have it. Thank you, everyone. And with that, we'll close the session and hope to see you all online tomorrow evening.
Thank you, Charlene. Thank you, everyone, for joining. And thank you for these wonderful comments.
Yes.
Good night,
Thank
everyone.
you. Good night, everyone.